Rev up your engines!
Well, here's an email from one of you viewers to show that what I say about Nissan quality being poor isn't just something I'm making up. About 11 years ago, I bought a 2006 Nissan Pathfinder because it had more horsepower than the Pilot and 4Runner. This vehicle ended up as being one of the worst financial decisions of my life. The tire pressure sensor failed. The failed crankshaft position sensor left us stranded on the highway. The fuel pump and sending unit failed. Then the transmission cooler line failed, allowing water into the transmission and wrecking it, and dealer charged me $4,500 for a new transmission. I tried to plead my case with Nissan. All they said was, "Oh, how often do you go to the dealership? You're just SOL." All of this happened to the truck before it had 100,000 miles on it. Warn other people. Here I am warning you. I tell you, their quality control is garbage. And what do? If you have a problem, oh, too bad, it's out of warranty. We're not going to fix anything, right? Stay away from these companies. They don't stand behind what they make. They don't make such great vehicles. Now, when Nissan was Datsun decades ago, they made really good vehicles, but their quality's been going for a long time, especially since Renault took over Nissan in 2000. Their quality's been going steadily downhill. My advice, don't get stuck like this guy. $4,500 for a tranny because the cooling line failed. And they knew they had problems with them, but they don't care, you know. Oh, too bad. We're not going to fix it for you. Don't buy them. Vote with your money. You don't buy their product, you won't have problems dealing with them. Learn from others' mistakes. Don't buy one of those things if you value your money. It's the best way to do it. Learn from other people and say, hey, I'm not wasting my money. I'll go to a company that makes products, that will stand behind the products. That's what you need to do. And in the case of this Nissan, a guy just proved it. And that was in 2006, this Pathfinder, right? They're even worse today, let me tell you. And end up with a crappy vehicle that you got to pay for fixing, and then the dealers just say, it's out of warranty, we don't care. Or it's under warranty, they don't fix it right anyways. I see that all the time too. Emery says, I'm new to fixing things up. My truck won't idle. It starts up, but it dies unless I keep my foot on the pedal. There's two main things that do that. First, check for vacuum leaks. When it's idling, listen for sucking sounds, see if any vacuum hoses fell off around the engine. Simple. You could try that, right? If that doesn't fix it, you could have a carboned up throttle. Watch my video. Make your car run better with a little spray cleaner, Scotty. Just watch that. And there's two types of cleaners. Use them both. Cost you about $14, $15 for the two cans. And after you do that cleaning, often it'll go totally normal because the carbon makes them sit wrong, and instead of closing, the carbon keeps them open. Well, if you have them open, then the thing is not going to idle right, and you give it a little more gas, then yeah, it'll run okay when you rev it up, but idling won't. So try that. It'll fix them a lot of times. Steve X says, can a NOx sensor code cause a catalytic converter code to appear on my car? I got a Honda. It had a NOx sensor and a catalytic converter code. I put the NOx sensor in, the catalytic converter code went away. And it has much better acceleration. Could that NOx sensor have caused the catalytic converter code to appear? Yes, it certainly can. Because generally, if the NOx sensors go bad, the NOx sensor's there, so if your engine's knocking, it retards the ignition. If you retard the ignition, then you're going to lose acceleration because more advanced ignition timing gives you better acceleration. If you have a more retarded ignition and the engine actually fires it earlier than later, you'll often find that it will run a little bit on the rich side. And if it runs too rich, guess what happens? Your catalytic converter will be all messed up. It'll trip a code for that. If you run rich or lean, the catalytic converter code can go. And if the NOx sensor is retarding the timing because it's bad too much and it shouldn't, so it makes total sense that fixing one fixed the other. That's the thing about codes. They're all interrelated. Always fix the most obvious things first and then go from there. And also, fix the cheapest things first, you know? Because the NOx sensor is a lot cheaper than a catalytic converter. Always try the cheap one first, reset it. Maybe it'll fix all of them. It often will. Edward Carmatic says, I recently bought a 2016 Spark with 75,000 miles. It hesitates, especially after a turn. Sometimes it pushes a little high before feeling a shift. I'm not sure what's going on. Need some advice. Well, you should have asked my advice before you bought the Chevy Spark. Those are one of the biggest piles of junk ever made. And I can guarantee you it's a transmission problem. They have one of the worst transmissions. I had a customer who had one. He had 3 of them replaced under warranty. They were so bad, right? Your transmission's starting to go out, and it's typical on those things. Those are poorly made vehicles. I hope you didn't pay much money for it. Basically, live with what it's doing. Because to fix it, you're going to have to do the transmission over, and that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and half the time, as the guy that had 3 of them replaced, under warranty. When they fix them, they don't last that long either. They're terrible cars. Sad but true, you bought the wrong car. That you're probably just going to want to live with it. You might try taking a quart of the fluid out of the tranny and putting a quart of the Lucas transmission stop slip in and pray it helps, but they're garbage transmissions. Eventually it'll break. You shouldn't have bought that vehicle in the first place. So I like warning people. You know, there's some vehicles, just don't buy. Don't even think about buying it. Unless you buy it for $500 and it still runs decent and you can drive it for a while. Then when the tranny breaks, you just send it to a junkyard. You don't want to get stuck with some junker like that costs so much money to fix, but at least it's running. Hope you didn't pay much. Hope it lasts a while. But when it does go out, don't fix the transmission. Just get rid of the car because they're garbage mobiles. Genius Kid 19 says, I got a problem with my Hyundai Accent suspension system. It's 2017 with 120,000 kilometers. The car drives fine on smooth roads, but when I get to a parking lot with bricks or pavers, I hear shaking or rattling. What do you think? They're not great riding cars to begin with. As they age, you're going to get noises and rattling. Now, first thing to check is jack it up, pull on the wheel, see if there's any play anywhere, and look at obvious things like the exhaust system hangs on these rubber donuts. They're rubber insulators. If one or two of them's broken, it's going to make it rattle. Easy to fix yourself. That could be the problem. Look at things like you've got torsion bars coming out the side to hold the car, so when you corner, the body doesn't roll too much. Well, they got little bolts on each end that hold the bars on the edge. The little bolts have rubber sealers, rubber washers. Sometimes those will crack and break and you need to replace them. They just bolt and unbolt. You can do that yourself. Check the obvious things first. Often, it's 2017, it's not that old. It'll be some kind of rubber thing that's broken and you just have to replace the rubber thing from it rattling. Because it's going smooth, there's nothing basically wrong with your suspension, but when you start hearing noises like that, you got to start checking for rubber things, especially the exhaust hangers. Sometimes it'll even be those stupid exhaust covers, the heat shields on your catalytic converter will rattle because they're welded on cheap and they'll start rattling and you can just tear them off if you want and throw them away. Or you can re-weld them back on if they're starting to rattle because the cheap spot welds are broken. That's the most common stuff. Well, it just happened yesterday. Somebody paid $45,100 for a 1993 Toyota pickup. Yes, I'm not making this up. It was an eBay auction. It was going for $45,000, and at the last second, somebody added $100 and bought it for $45,100. Now, it was found in a barn, and it only had 84 miles on it, but still, it's an awful lot of money for a 93 pickup. Now, the guy who sold it was kind of hilarious. It had 83 miles, and he said, well, I'll have a little bit more before I sell it, but not 100. He went to driving around a little right before he sold it. Now, the truck lived in New Hampshire. It's got some surface rust, being that old. It was really in a barn. I mean, it wasn't a barn found all dirty and dusty. It was just stored in a barn. The guy who sold it said they bought it from the original owner and they owned it for 1 year, and the guy just bought it and then parked it in his barn. And it's even a manual transmission, the cheaper version. $45,100. Boy, I don't know what that guy paid a year ago for it. Boy, we bet a lot of money on that. There's no way he paid close to $45,000 for it. Before the auction, it had already been up to $35,500 and ended up selling for $45,100 for a 93 Toyota pickup. People basically have lost their minds. You get that old and it's sitting, oh, the seals are going to be rotten, it's going to be leaking. Whoever bought that one, they got a little bit something squirrely going on in their head there. Pay that much money for an old truck that, who knows what's even going to work on. It's been sitting for what, 28 years, not used? It's not a good thing to pay that kind of money for that. Unless you got a museum or something. Big Truck says, what do I do with spent chemicals? Parts stores like AutoZone take used oil, but how do you recycle the other used fluids? I want to be responsible and do the right thing. Well, most places have recycling centers where you can bring antifreeze and other stuff. Check in your local area. That's the way that most of that stuff goes. AutoZones, like you said, they'll take your used oil. When my father ran a garage, of course, people came and picked it up and recycled from the garage, so we had different containers, and we had to pay money for them to take it away. Originally, they paid us money, then they gave us free pencils, and then they charged us so much per gallon for taking the stuff away. Garages have to pay for it, so they're not going to take yours for free unless you get your oil changed there, and then they're making money doing the job. Your waste stuff, there's no reason for that. Unless, now, if you're talking about transmission fluid, different things like that, you might ask some of the local garages, because some of those guys use it for heating oil, and they'll gladly take it off your hands. They'll use it to heat their place in the winter. You might ask locally and say, I got this oil stuff, do you want it to use to run your heater? If they say, yeah, you can give it to them, and then they'll use it to heat their garage inside. A lot of those things are real efficient these days, do a good job heating, and they burn a lot of waste oil. You might check that out too. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.